My fiancé caught me kissing my ex at our engagement party. He brought both of us inside and ended the wedding in front of everyone. But what followed, when our families turned against me, was even more devastating. Marcus looked heartbroken as we stood there in the garden. His face was flushed with anger, and I could see the pain swimming in his eyes. Still, I believed I could explain it all, if he'd just give me a second to speak. Tyler, my ex, stood awkwardly nearby, guilt written all over his face. That only made things worse. Marcus kept repeating the same question over and over, "How could you do this to me? On tonight of all nights?" "It's not what you think, Marcus." "Please believe me," I said, reaching for his arm. But he recoiled like I was something toxic. I tried to explain. Tyler had simply come to offer congratulations. We'd reminisced about old times, one thing led to another, and then, it just happened. But it didn't mean anything. Marcus wasn't listening. His whole body trembled with rage, and I noticed guests beginning to drift out into the garden, drawn by the noise. The last thing I needed right now was an audience. Jake, Marcus's cousin, was the first to come out. Right behind him was my sister Emma. She took one glance at Tyler's crumpled shirt, then at my smeared makeup, and her expression turned to instant fury. "You've got to be kidding me, Jessica," she snapped. The disappointment in her voice cut deep, but she didn't know the full story. "Here? At your own engagement party," she continued in disbelief. Marcus suddenly grabbed my wrist and began pulling me toward the venue. Tyler just stood there like a deer in headlights, unsure whether to follow or disappear. I kept pleading with Marcus as we walked. I told him it had been a moment of weakness, that I'd been overwhelmed by all the wedding pressure. Seeing Tyler again had brought up confusing emotions, but it didn't mean I didn't love Marcus. "Everyone's going to be staring at us," I whispered as we neared the back door. "I don't care anymore," he muttered. "Can we just talk this out in private later?" "No, Jessica," he said, his voice colder than I'd ever heard. "We're done with private talks. Everyone here deserves to know who they're celebrating tonight." The moment we stepped back inside, it was as if a spotlight fell on us. Music still played in the background, but every conversation stopped. All eyes turned to us, Marcus, fuming, me, looking like a wreck. My mom was standing near the bar, chatting with Marcus's parents. When she saw our faces, she immediately rushed over, concern written all over hers. "What's going on, sweetheart?" she asked, looking between us. Before I could respond, Marcus raised his voice loud enough for half the room to hear. "The engagement is over," he declared. "I just caught Jessica making out with her ex in the garden." The silence that followed was suffocating. It felt like the entire room was frozen, all eyes fixed on me. My mom went pale. Marcus's mother gasped, covering her mouth in shock. His father just stared at me with open disgust. "Marcus, not here," I whispered desperately, trying to calm him. "Please don't do this in front of everyone." He ignored me and pulled out his phone. "Let's just go somewhere and talk like adults," I begged. But instead of putting the phone away, he began scrolling. A chill crept over me. I knew exactly what he was looking at, the messages between Tyler and me from the past few weeks. Messages I thought were private. Messages I thought I had hidden well. Clearly, I hadn't. "Want me to read these aloud?" Marcus said, holding his phone up for others nearby to see. "Should I tell everyone how you've been planning this little reunion for weeks behind my back?" My stomach dropped. Taken out of context, those texts sounded awful. They made it seem like I'd been plotting this betrayal all along, even though in my mind, it had only been innocent conversation. Tyler and I were just catching up, as friends. But I could understand how Marcus would see it differently, especially the part where Tyler confessed he still had feelings for me. And worse, I hadn't shut him down right away. "They don't mean what you think they do," I murmured, but even I could hear how unconvincing I sounded. "Tyler just wanted to congratulate us," I added. "We were reminiscing, that's all." Marcus didn't stop. In a loud, steady voice, he read aloud from his phone. "Hey Jess, can't stop thinking about you since I heard the news." He looked up at me, eyes full of betrayal. Then he read the next part, my reply. "And here's your response," he said bitterly. "You told him you've been thinking about him too, and asked if you wanted to meet up soon." The crowd around us was growing. Even Tyler's sister, who had come because she was friends with my cousin, looked horrified. But what truly broke me was the way my own family was looking at me, like they didn't even recognize me anymore. "I was just being polite," I said, knowing immediately how pathetic that sounded. I didn't want to be rude to someone I used to care about. Marcus let out a cold laugh. "Polite, huh?" He scrolled again. "Here you are being polite by telling him you miss talking to him. And that you're nervous about the wedding because you're scared you're marrying the wrong person." I wanted the floor to open and swallow me whole. Hearing those words aloud made them sound so much worse. But when I wrote them, I hadn't meant anything sinister. I was just dealing with typical pre-wedding doubts, something many brides go through. But Marcus wasn't done. "And here's the best part," he said, his voice rising. "Just yesterday, you told him to come to the party tonight, because you needed closure." He turned to me. "Closure? Seriously, Jessica?" That's when my father stepped in. His face was pale and stunned, his voice quiet but heavy with disbelief. "Jessica, what is he talking about?" he asked. "You invited your ex to your engagement party?" "No, Dad, I didn't invite him," I said quickly, my voice shaky. "I swear I didn't. He'd only asked if he could come by to offer congratulations." At the time, it felt strange to say no, we hadn't ended badly, after all. But even that wasn't entirely honest. Tyler had definitely pushed to be included, and I hadn't exactly resisted. A part of me did want to see him again before walking down the aisle. Not because I wanted to cheat, never that. I just needed to see him one last time, to prove to myself that whatever feelings I'd once had were gone. That I was truly ready to devote myself to Marcus without doubts. That illusion shattered the moment Marcus's father came over and gently placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "Maybe this is something you two should handle in private," he said calmly. But Marcus shook his head and pulled the engagement ring from his pocket. "No, Dad. Everyone needs to know exactly who she is." And with that, he threw the ring to the floor. The small metallic clink as it hit the marble echoed louder than anything else in the room. I'm not marrying someone who thinks flirting with an ex counts as just being polite. I instinctively bent down to pick up the ring, but Marcus stepped back, refusing to let me get close. I heard a few gasps from the guests, followed by hushed whispers. Someone's aunt even muttered how humiliating the whole thing was, making my humiliation 10 times worse. "That wasn't emotional cheating," I said quietly, standing back up with the ring in my hand. Marcus let out a bitter laugh. "I love you, Marcus. You know I do. One stupid mistake doesn't erase that." "One stupid mistake," he echoed, his voice shaking. "Jessica, you've been lying to me for weeks. You were secretly messaging your ex, sneaking around behind my back. Then tonight, while our families were inside celebrating our future, you snuck out to hook up with him in the garden." The way he said it made it sound so cold and calculated, so much worse than what had really happened. The kiss hadn't been planned. Tyler had blindsided me, telling me he still loved me, that he regretted letting me go. I froze. It was a moment of weakness, not some scheme to betray the man I was about to marry. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. What he said caught me off guard. I wasn't thinking straight. But even to me, the words felt hollow. Because the truth was, I didn't pull away when Tyler kissed me. Not right away. For a few brief seconds, I kissed him back. Not because I didn't love Marcus, but because it felt familiar. Safe. It reminded me of who I was back when things were simpler, before adulthood and commitments and big decisions clouded everything. Emma, my sister, came up beside me and gently touched my arm. "Jess, maybe you should stop talking," she whispered. I could see the disappointment in her eyes. She couldn't even look at me properly. "No, Emma. Everyone needs to hear the full story," I said, raising my voice slightly to address the room. "Yes, I made a mistake. But I'm not some heartless monster who set out to ruin the life of the man I love." But scanning the room, I could tell most people didn't believe a word I said. And honestly, if I were in their shoes, I'd probably think the same. Marcus's sister, Sarah, stood with her arms crossed, silently shaking her head. Even my cousin, who'd always had my back, was looking at me like I'd become a stranger. My mom finally stepped forward, eyes glassy and full of sorrow. "Jessica, sweetheart, what were you thinking?" Her voice cracked, and that hurt more than anything else. "This man loves you. He wanted to spend the rest of his life with you. And this is how you treat him?" "Mom, you don't understand," I tried to say, but she held up a hand, cutting me off. "Oh, I understand perfectly," she said coldly. Then she turned to Marcus. "I'm so sorry, Marcus. You didn't deserve this. You're a good man, and I'm ashamed of how my daughter has behaved tonight." Her words hit me like a dagger. I had always believed, no matter what, that my parents would stand by me, even in my worst moments. But now, they looked at me with the same judgment as everyone else. Even my father, who usually stayed neutral in emotional matters, was nodding silently in agreement with my mother. "You don't have to apologize for Jessica's actions, Mrs. Chin," Marcus said respectfully. But the fury still simmered beneath his words. "Still, I appreciate your support. This night hasn't been easy for me." And just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, Tyler opened his mouth. "Look," he said, stepping forward. "This is my fault. I never should have come tonight. I never should have told Jessica how I felt." Marcus's head snapped toward him. "Don't you dare try to take the blame for her decisions. She's not a child. She made her own choices, she chose to betray me." But Tyler didn't stop. Jessica was confused. "We have a long history, and seeing me again stirred up things she thought she'd buried." "Shut up, Tyler," I hissed, panicking. "You're not helping." Because now, everyone knew this wasn't just a meaningless kiss. It had been building for weeks. Marcus turned back to me, his expression hardened with disgust. "So, he's telling the truth," he said. "You've been harboring feelings for him this entire time?" "No. That's not what he meant." I insisted. I was just surprised to hear from him again. It made me nostalgic. "But that doesn't mean I ever wanted to be with him over you." "Then why didn't you pull away, Jessica?" he asked, his voice breaking. "If you really wanted to be with me, why didn't you stop him the second he kissed you?" I had no answer. The truth, the part one couldn't say out loud, was that in those few seconds, I forgot everything. Marcus. The engagement. The future. It all disappeared. I was 22 again, in college, kissing the boy I once thought was my forever. "I don't know," I whispered. I wasn't thinking. It's like, my mind just shut down. "Your brain shut down?" Marcus said, incredulous. "That's your excuse? That your brain shut down while you cheated on me during our engagement party?" By now, some of the guests had begun to quietly leave. The tension in the room was unbearable. But the core group, family and closest friends, remained, watching like spectators at a train wreck. A woman from the venue staff came over, clearly uncomfortable. "Excuse me," she said gently, "but we've had some complaints about the noise. Perhaps you'd like to take this discussion elsewhere?" "There's nothing left to discuss," Marcus replied flatly. "As far as I'm concerned, the party's over. And so is this relationship." He turned and walked toward the exit. Panic gripped me. If he left now, there might be no undoing this. I rushed after him, calling his name, grabbing at his jacket. "Marcus, please don't go like this. Just give me a chance to explain, properly." He stopped and turned, and the look on his face, it was worse than anger. It was pure heartbreak. "Explain what, Jessica?" he said quietly. "How you've been emotionally involved with your ex for weeks. How you invited him here tonight. How you slipped away to make out with him while I was inside telling people how excited I was to marry you." "I know it looks awful," I pleaded. "But people mess up. I'm not perfect, and neither are you. But we can work through this if we both want to." "You're right," he said. "I'm not perfect. But I've never lied to you. Never cheated. Never humiliated you in front of everyone we love." He shook his head slowly. "Don't pretend this is something we both did. This is on you. Let me step back a second. My name's Jessica. I'm 29, and I work in marketing at a tech startup in Austin. Marcus and I met 2 years ago at a friend's birthday party. We just clicked, instantly. Everything about it felt natural, easy. I never imagined it would end like this. He's 31, works in finance, and is by far the most dependable and grounded man I've ever dated. After years of being with guys who were fun but chaotic, I thought that kind of stability was exactly what I needed. Tyler and I had dated back in college. We were together for 3 years before things fell apart. We were both young, overwhelmed by graduation and unsure how to handle the transition into adulthood. He moved out to California for a job while I stayed in Texas. Just like that, we drifted apart. We didn't talk for almost 5 years, until last month, when he reached out after hearing about my engagement through mutual friends. At first, his messages seemed harmless, just polite congratulations and small talk. But over time, the tone shifted. He started opening up about how much he regretted the way we ended and how he'd never truly gotten over me. I know I should have cut it off immediately. But curiosity got the better of me. A part of me liked the attention, from someone who once knew me better than anyone. When Tyler asked if he could come to the engagement party, I told Marcus. He wasn't thrilled, but he trusted me enough to say I could handle it however I saw fit. I honestly believed I could prove to myself that I had moved on, that I was all in with Marcus. But when Tyler walked into the party, looking like the same guy I used to love, just more polished and successful, I felt this wave of memories rush in, and it completely threw me off. We chatted briefly by the bar. He complimented my appearance and said Marcus was lucky to have me. It should have just been a nice, casual comment, but the way he said it, it caught me off guard. Later, overwhelmed by the pressure and noise, I stepped outside for some air. Tyler followed me out. He said he needed to speak to me alone, and I assumed it would be more catching up. Instead, he dropped a bombshell, told me he made the biggest mistake of his life letting me go, and that he was still in love with me. I told him it was too late, that I was engaged, happy, and getting married in 6 months. But he didn't back down. He said he couldn't let me walk into a mistake without at least fighting for me. He insisted I was just settling with Marcus, picking the safe option over real passion. And then, without warning, he kissed me. I should have pushed him away right then and there. But instead, for what felt like forever, though it was probably no more than 10 or 15 seconds, I kissed him back. It was like muscle memory, like my body still remembered what it felt like to love him when everything was raw, intense, and unpredictable. Then I heard Marcus's voice calling my name, and I jolted back to reality. I pulled away just as Marcus rounded the corner and saw us. The look on his face was absolute heartbreak. "How long has this been going on?" he asked, fists clenched at his sides. "It's not like that," I said quickly. "He just got here tonight, we were just talking. Things got out of hand, it didn't mean anything." But the moment the words left my mouth, I knew how weak they sounded. Marcus pulled out his phone. I didn't even realize he had seen my texts, must have looked through them when I left my phone on the kitchen counter. These messages go back 3 weeks, Jessica, he said, scrolling. 3 weeks of you telling him you miss him and asking when you'll see him again. Hearing those messages read aloud, in front of Tyler, made me realize how badly it all looked. From my perspective, it was just innocent catching up between two people who had history. But to Marcus, it sounded like betrayal. You're taking this all out of context, I tried to explain. Tyler and I were just reconnecting. Maybe we got a little nostalgic, but I wasn't planning anything. Nostalgic? Tyler interrupted, clearly confused. Jess, yesterday you told me you weren't sure you were making the right decision marrying him. I wanted to scream. Why would he bring that up now? Yes, I'd told him I was nervous about the wedding. But isn't that normal? Every bride gets cold feet. It doesn't mean she doesn't want to get married. It was just a moment of doubt, not a declaration of regret. I tried to explain that to Marcus. Every bride questions if she's making the right choice. It's not a sign that something's wrong, it's just nerves. But he wasn't hearing any of it. His jaw was tight, and his eyes were burning with hurt and fury. He grabbed my wrist and began pulling me back toward the venue. Tyler stood frozen, looking like he didn't know what just happened. We're going back inside, Marcus said, his voice like ice. And you're going to explain to everyone why there's no engagement anymore. Marcus, please, not like this, I begged. We should talk privately, not turn this into a scene. You made that choice when you kissed another man at our engagement party. When we walked back in, the music was still playing and people were chatting, but I could see heads turning. People had noticed we'd been gone too long. Without hesitation, Marcus marched to the DJ's mic. My heart dropped. Excuse me, everyone, he said, and the room quieted. I have something to say about Jessica and me. I tried to reach for the microphone, but he moved away and kept speaking. The engagement is off, he said, loud and clear. A wave of shocked gasps echoed through the room. I just caught Jessica kissing her ex-boyfriend outside. Silence. I could feel everyone's eyes on me. The judgment. The shock. My mother looked like she might collapse. Marcus's parents appeared horrified, watching their son expose our private disaster in front of all these people. Marcus, stop, I said, trying again to grab the mic. He dodged me. Everyone deserves to know the truth. The woman you're celebrating tonight has been lying, cheating, and betraying someone who loved her. Guests began to gather their things. The awkwardness in the air was suffocating. I finally got close enough to take the microphone from him. He's upset, I said, my voice trembling. He's not thinking clearly. This was just a misunderstanding. But it was too late. No one believed me. Most people were already leaving, whispering and side-eyeing me as they went. Even my own relatives were staring at me like I was a stranger. I realized, in that moment, that my image, my reputation, had just been shattered beyond repair. Marcus walked out that night and never came back. He packed up everything from my apartment while I was at work. Neither his family nor mine speaks to me anymore. The wedding was cancelled, and I lost every deposit. Word got around. My coworkers treat me differently. Even my closest friend from college said she needed time to process. Sometimes, I still wonder if everyone overreacted to a single mistake, a moment of weakness. Subscribe if you think there's nothing wrong with getting closure from an ex before tying the knot. Hit like if you've ever been called crazy just for being honest about your feelings. And tell me in the comments, have you ever been completely misunderstood while just trying to do the right thing?